All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Ryan Morgan, the Director of Disaster Response with SBP. Welcome to some Lunch and Learn. We'll be talking about SBP disaster response, what it means for us, our methodology, and just how we go about it, and what's the goals of our overall response program. It's a perfect time because we are knee deep in hurricane season with Beryl out in the Caribbean. So this is a good time to go over some things and get a good refresher. All right, so the agenda. Response overview and goals, response triggers and pre-assessments, post-disaster assessment and cost of impact, AmeriCorps deployment and volunteer call, SBP program implementation and timeline. All right, so the overall goal is not to win the response. I'm pretty sure some of you have heard that phrase before. There's a lot of organizations who provide things like food, clothing, temporary shelter, toiletries, things of that nature. That is not our goal or SBP's goal when it comes down to response. We are a long-term recovery organization whose goal essentially is to build houses, safe, secure houses, as quickly and efficiently as possible. So our response program is designed to set up those SBP programs to get people back into their homes, not necessarily provide a initial support for response. When we evaluate a community, we're looking for a few different things, mainly socioeconomic data, the community's capacity to rebuild, and the severity of damage to the community. In a nutshell, we want communities that are hit the hardest and lack the means of or capacity to quickly bring the communities back to pre-disaster condition. As JR will put it, we're not trying to rebuild the Hamptons. All right, so our goals when we look at a community is to first gather data, disseminate that data to the program leaders, and coordinate the programs within SBP. We just want to focus and connect internal and external dots, coordinate the program outreach, and take recommendations on how to best position SBP programs post-disaster. And at the very end, all these things factor into fundraising and outward-facing communications to gain support so that we can increase the community's capacity. The more eyes we get on the situation, the more money we bring in, the more work that we can do. So first and foremost, just going through the timeline of how we get things done, we first have to track and evaluate the damage of a community. So for instance, right now we're tracking Hurricane Beryl through the National Weather Service, local news reports, social media, external connections, and VOAD outreach and coordination. We take all these things in to get a snapshot of how was the damage in the community and general location of what was hit. The second thing that we use evaluation is we have target states that we're looking for. So SBP is focusing on particularly the Gulf Coast, so Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, North and South Carolina. So if a storm were to hit in one of those areas, we have a tiered response on if we're going to actually deploy SBP services. So tier 1 and 2 is no SBP response. Tier 1 is less than 1,000 homes impacted, and typical things like severe weather, minor flooding. Tier 2, same thing, no response. This one may be a little bit bigger, maybe a little bit more media attention, but it is presidentially declared, but it has no individual assistance attached to it. Now, tier 3 and 4 is where SBP is looking to respond. Tier 3 is a medium federal disaster, and what we call a virtual response. So we'll offer things like a virtual recovery 101 training, where we talk about muck, gut, kind of a DIY approach to recovery. We will offer DAP, which is our disaster assistance program led by Claire, for FEMA assistance, and this is typically less than 10,000 applicants for IA. Now, major federal disaster is where it's like the Avengers assemble of SBP. We take everybody who's available and we are doing an in-person response. It's a presidentially declared disaster with individual assistance, and this is over 10,000 applicants. This is where we're going to talk about some of the programs offered in Tier 4 a little bit later in a couple of slides. All right, so the first major indicator of if we're going to respond, besides the tiers and where it's located, the next thing we're looking at is the socioeconomic data. Particularly the income, poverty rates, home ownership, home value. If we're lucky enough, we can get some insurance data because that'll determine how many homes we can't build or how many people we'll need to help. The next major one is SOVI, Social Vulnerability Index. It has 15 factors that basically compile a list of socioeconomic indicators such as English speaking, income, age, disabilities, so forth and so on to figure out if the community will have a good rebuild capacity or an individual or they won't be able to rebuild. All right, next up, the next part of the assessment is led by Juliet.
All right, y'all. Thanks for taking some time out of your lunch today to listen to hear about response. The next step in the response programming is then going to be boots on the ground. A damage assessment team, mostly comprised of me and Ryan. We like to joke that Ryan is the one kissing the babies and the face of SBP and shaking the hands. I'm going to be more of the nitty gritty, the one wearing the Tyvek suit, getting dirty. So when we go into a community that we've outlined that could be potential opportunity for SBP, we're looking at a couple of different factors to decide if we want to really fully commit to it. We're looking at what kind of event it might be, whether it's hurricane, tornado, what kind of damage might be associated with those, and then looking at the construction in the area itself. Looking at roofing types, is shingles, is it tiles, is it metal tin, along with the framing, timber and stick, concrete block that you find commonly in the Caribbean islands. And then foundation, is it concrete and slab? Is there a basement underneath there? All of this information really just adds to understanding what kind of rebuild is going to be necessary and how long a potential muck and gut process is really going to take. So SPP can kind of get an understanding ahead of time what the financial commitment is going to look like per house. For a build program. And then I start looking at what kind of damage is going on. So is it flooding damage? Is it 2 inches of flooding, or is it a massive storm surge and there was 8 feet of flooding? Was it more of a windstorm where full roofs are missing off, or are there trees down everywhere and access is limited? And then we're trying to understand how SPP fits in best. If we're able to get preliminary budgets for build and share programs, best practices for advise, preliminary expectations for the DAP team, and constantly media and comms to get communications out to donors to get an understanding of how SBP is actively responding. Ryan, you can hit the next slide. So I'm coming in from the AmeriCorps deployment side of it. So what do I need to send my AmeriCorps team at the disaster corps project leads? First, a significant impact, that's tier 4 that Ryan was just talking about. I'm looking for a safe zone. It's deemed safe by the county, the state that we'd be working in. Search and rescue's done. Waters have receded to a safe level. All those kinds of things to make sure that when we're bringing our people in and our volunteers in, that it's going to be a safe area for us to be operating in. I'm looking for lodging, whether that's setting up in a conference center in a hotel, or staying in the back room of a church, or Airbnb credits. We need to have somewhere safe and secure for people to be going after working a nice 10-hour shift 6 days a week. I'm also looking for warehouse storage to keep our tools safe, so that we were not driving around with heavily loaded trucks in these zones. And then finally, client queue. That's probably the most important one. Utilizing resources like crisis cleanup to identify communities that's reporting damage and getting those people lined up so that way as we work through projects, that we have a next project ready to rock and roll. What does the AmeriCorps deployment team do specifically? Muck and gut, mold suppression, debris removal, those are like our bread and butters. And those are most commonly found in water events, so major floods and hurricanes with major storm surge, getting those construction materials out of the home, and then preventing the home from further mold growth and future mold growth. Things like warehouse management is sometimes part of our responses. Resource distribution is often a part of disaster response in that an area is inundated with resources, perhaps water, perhaps hygiene kits, and then using the available people to then distribute them. When we responded to Dahlia, every damage assessment that we went to, we were bringing a hygiene kit to that had been donated. So it kind of just they end up becoming wrapped into one. Doing unmet needs assessments, so understanding if whether we're working with someone or not, what additional needs that they have. Do they need health services? Do they need medical services? Do they need legal services? And trying to make those connections. And then finally, constantly SBP intervention. How can we feed the DAP team? How can we prepare to get a build program moving? How do we keep comms inundated with pictures of what SBP is doing and what the zone is looking like, so that way we have that clear communication with our people, with our audience. You can do next slide. So a couple of recent deployments that we've had, Hurricane Ida in 2021 was a Category 4 that impacted the southeast area of Louisiana. This one was particular in that is so close to the New Orleans operating office, so we were able to pull in folks from the Houston office, DCPLs from the Houston office, over to the New Orleans office, and we're able to just work in essentially what is the backyard of New Orleans. When I joined SBP as a DCPL, I was working on rebuilding a home that my previous AmeriCorps members had been mucking and gutting. So it was a really great, like, full circle motion where we were able to do mucking and gutting responses. We also had a lot of roof tarping moving forward, and also that's where I think the FEMA appeals program really was born, essentially. Hurricane Ian in 2022 is Category 4 that impacted the western, well, really all over Florida, but southwestern section of Florida. 9 million people without a power, 150 people died in the storm in just the United States. So really massive impact that we were able to respond to, and we had an SPP funded deployment going on with multiple PLs and volunteers involved. We also had AmeriCorps members lending services to the National AmeriCorps response team, with Mackenzie working out of the Joint Information Center, and then myself and multiple other PLs who are lending training services, mucking, gutting, coaching, and damage assessments to an additional mission assignment for the National AmeriCorps program. Next slide. Another piece that SBP prides itself on is our ability to involve volunteers. I look at it in a way of, if I have 3 to 5 AmeriCorps members working through a house, we could probably muck and gut a standard size home in about 4 to 5 days. But if I have 2 PLs with 5 to 10 volunteers working through a house, we're gonna move through that house much faster. I'm looking at more of like a 2 to 3 day timeline. And all of this really just adds to our ability to work through houses to help more people get to that rebuild stage, to be prepared to move back to their new normal. And so when I'm looking at volunteers, I have a couple of different avenues where I'm sourcing them from. Talking to different VOAD, in the VOAD meetings, looking for folks who might have some extra bodies, who need some more direction. We're looking at local partners with local branches like farmers, travelers, Entergy in New Orleans, folks who have capacity and weren't impacted by the storm, but still want to help their community. Using marketing and media outreach to get those once-off volunteers, and then also utilizing an AmeriCorps disaster response team if we're operating in the same area. Next slide. And then finally, this year, as part of my role, I'm trying to make our responses more impactful, the AmeriCorps response more impactful, and how can we stage SBP to better support our community in that long-term capacity. And so what I'm piloting this year is the Volunteer Disaster Corps, which is going to be a standby unit of pre-approved and pre-trained volunteers who are going to deploy with us for 5 to 14 days of commitment. And helping with some of the services that we provide. This is a more unique opportunity we haven't tried before. We're mostly just working with once-off volunteers in the response zone. We're really missing that ability to have folks who want to be more involved in a community that they might not be directly related to. And so pulling folks who have the financial and time commitment abilities to lend a hand for 5 days. I see your question, JR, and I will get to it in just a sec. Is there legal documentation you require before entering a home, such as a right of entry? Yes, we do have legal documentation. In order to enter a home, you need to be talking with the homeowner, not just the renter, but having signatures provided by the homeowners to allow A, entry to the property, and then B, working on the property, particularly because we're utilizing AmeriCorps and volunteer labor. We need to make sure that our liabilities are covered. In the worst case scenario that something is to go wrong, the homeowner has to sign off that they're okay with us using volunteer labor and thus unskilled labor, essentially, regardless of how pre-trained or untrained that they are. So yes, we do have legal documentation. We also have a media liability release form for folks who don't want their photos taken or their property's photos taken, or folks who do, and that way we can kind of share those resources a little bit. So overall, trying to pull in volunteers for a longer term capacity. And my ultimate goal is really just to work through as many houses as possible. I view deployments in a 30 to 45 day period, a 30 to 5 day period, 30 to 45 day period, excuse me. And in those 30 to 45 days, if I can have a small team working through houses, we could maybe get 5 done. But if I have the larger team I have access to, the more houses I can get done in 30 days could translate into 10 to 15 homes being completed and ready for rebuild. That's 10 to 15 families who are ready to move forward to their next stage. If SBP is able to stand up a build program, then we're able to just commute them right into that and get them one step closer to that new normal that they'll be getting to. And so that's the ultimate goal of my side of response is how can we involve more hands to really move these folks forward in conjunction with their needs. Next slide, and I think it's back to you, Ryan.
Believe so, yeah. Thank you, Juliet. So how does all this work? Or how does this all come together in general? So in general, we try to get all this done within 1 to 3 months following a disaster. So let's say Beryl were to make a hard northeasterly turn and hit Texas and Louisiana. So the first thing that we're doing is between 1 and 2 days within 1 day, we like to have a full socioeconomic assessment of the counties that it hits. So if it's 20 counties, I'm pulling data for all 20 counties and making sure that when we deploy, we have the best information possible to us so we're not wasting resources or going to an area that really wasn't impacted, even though the news may say it had been impacted. So we want to do a pre-assessment deployment with socioeconomic data, NOAA information, and local news, and really social media information to see what neighborhoods and communities will hit the hardest. And then after we deploy, that's me and Juliet, we're looking to provide training, as well as get AmeriCorps team on the ground, as well as start taking photos for donations. And that's normally within 1 week to 2 weeks max. The training that we're offering is more geared toward recovery 101, more of the DIY training. We'll recover gut mold suppression, insurance a little bit, things of that nature. And then lastly, during that 1 or 2 week period, we're looking to solidify our local connections. Who's who in the zoo, who's making things move in the community, who is the important person that we need to talk to get things done. Secondly, after that 1 or 2 week period, more than likely, IA has already been declared as a major tier 4 disaster. We're looking to implement DAP and FEMA training and application services. If we can solidify a physical location, then that team will be there locally, but they'll be doing it virtually until we can solidify a physical location. After that 2 week to 1 month period of implementing DAP and getting it going, we're looking to bring in the advice team with JR and his crew. We're looking to start a RAW, which is Regional Recovery Acceleration Week, where it's like a all encompassing training for local community leaders and government officials. They're looking to provide government training to the local officials, as well as seeing if we can start talking about the RAF, Recovery Acceleration Fund. And then lastly, after that 1 to 2 month period of providing trainings, mucking and gutting, solidifying our connections, we want to start building homes. Again, the goal is to get people back in their home as quickly as possible. And we bring all that stuff together, all our community connections, trainings, money from donations to start building homes as fast as possible. And that's where Andy comes in. So with that being said, I think that is all. Any questions? I think I got something in the chat. Going once, going twice. All right, I think that ends our lunch and learn. I appreciate everyone for stopping by. Y'all have a safe 4th of July. Have a good day.